I'm Elizabeth Carroll. My husband Jim and I have been bringing the Marriage and Life Enrichment Boot Camp to people just like you for close to 30 years. You might recognize us from the hit TV show Marriage Boot Camp. We created and starred in the show for 7 seasons with the hope of teaching celebrity couples how to do healthy relationships and also to reach the viewers with the message that you too can have a great life and a great relationship if you just had the tools. Now, we not only understand you, but we've been there and we have proven techniques to take you from where you are now to the joyful life you long for. Grads will tell you that the boot camp is life-changing, and they rank it as one of the top 10 experiences of their lives. Just check out the testimonials. And the boot camp itself is action-packed. You will never be bored because you will be an active participant in your healing journey, and you will leave with the tools to create and sustain the life you've always wanted. Join us. If you have any questions, contact us on the website or hit us up on chat or just give us a call. We can't wait to see you become the best version of you. Hi, this is Elizabeth Carroll with Marriage Boot Camp. Welcome to this week's live stream. The topic this week is trauma. Now, over the course of many years of doing the Marriage and Life Enrichment Boot Camp and the most recent live stream events, a theme has come up over and over, and we're going to address that today. The theme is the unhealed trauma or leftover suffering that has not healed and that's now affecting our lives, our marriages, and our relationships. Let me start by explaining that trauma is an incident that happens that is so overwhelming that we can't make sense of the experience. And worse, the strong emotions that come with that, associated with the trauma, are often left unprocessed. Many negative emotions that are left unprocessed not only affect our ability to connect in a relationship, but it also leaves us like intrusive memories, flashbacks, and nightmares. And we also see avoidance behaviors like emotional numbing and withdrawal. Now imagine how that affects your relationships. One of the most common ways of trying to gain control over the trauma is to blame ourselves for what happened. We are now in control. And the result of this cycle of self-blame is shame. So here to talk to us today on the subject of shame is Dr. Mark Baker. Dr. Baker received his PhD in clinical psychology and also has a master's degree in theology. He currently serves as the executive director of the La Vie Counseling Center in California and is the author of several books, and not to brag, but I have read them all, and I'm missing just one book, which is, I have it, I just think I lent it, Spiritual Wisdom for a Happier Life. So these are my copies. This one is my copy of his bestseller, sold over 2 million copies worldwide, and you can see it is very, very well loved. I mean, it's so great. So Mark and I have probably known each other for over 30 years. And you can go online and see him all over the place. But Mark, I'm wondering if you can tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't get from your bio.
I would be happy to do that, Elizabeth. Good to see you as always. I'd say what you wouldn't get from my bio is actually why I became a psychologist. I grew up in a small town here in California, going to church every Sunday with my grandfather. He was my hero. I was actually named after him. And I would love to stay over at his house, spend the night on Saturday night at his house and go to church with him on Sunday morning. And I noticed people coming over to his house to get some advice from him. He lived in this very simple trailer, but it was a double wide, and he not an educated man. He didn't graduate 8th grade, actually, but people would
Wow.
come from the church to get his counsel. I would see them disappear into his little study, and they would come out afterwards, wiping their eyes and shaking his hand and saying, "Thank you so much. It was so helpful." I didn't know what was going on in there, but I could tell that he was changing people's lives. And the only book I ever saw him read was the Bible. And so these people were coming to get his counsel from this not even eighth grade educated guy to live their lives better. And it made such an impression on me that I decided somewhere back in the recesses of my mind, I wanted to be that kind of guy, the kind of guy who would give counsel to people that put together biblical wisdom and emotional truths and help them do their better lives. So actually, that's what I do today. I do the very same thing my grandfather did. It's just that I went on beyond the eighth grade and ended up getting education in both theology and psychology to try to model myself after my grandfather. So that's actually why I'm a psychologist today, just seeing him help people using the wisdom of the Bible to make their emotional lives run better.
Wow.
And
Wow. That's really,
every time someone has a great story to tell because of the work we've done, I think of my grandfather.
mm, that's so wonderful. That's so great to have like a role model and someone in your life that actually is like a person that you can relate to, that is actually, I think about how we hear in the church all the time that I want to see Jesus with skin on, and it's so
Right,
great to hear stories about people who actually are that for each of us. So
right.
anyway, today, what I want to focus on is your most recent book, Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectations and Embrace God's Acceptance. So shame it's a hard topic. It's a
Yep.
popular topic. It's something we talk about, like those of us but people with shame really don't talk about it much. So can we start by
Yeah.
asking you to define shame?
Right. Shame is a feeling, and it's a
Mm,
feeling of unworthiness. It results from disconnection and causes disconnection in relationship. So shame is a bad feeling about who you are. Uh,
mm.
I have to right off the bat distinguish it from guilt. Guilt
Yes.
is feeling bad about what you did. Shame is feeling
Hmm.
bad about who you are. Uh, Guilt is a healthy thing to do. You need to know that when you've done something wrong, you're motivated to do it right. So guilt that's motivated by love makes us correct bad behavior, but shame makes us want to hide because it makes me feel less than, unlovable, and defective. That feeling
Yes.
makes me want to go in and not do anything. And we have lots of research that points to shame being a very toxic emotion that gets in the way of our relationships. It results from broken relationship and it causes broken relationship. But in essence,
Mm,
shame is believing the lie that you're not worthy of love. And it's a feeling, and then and I explain in my book how it gets a little more complicated when people become shame prone, and that creates a lot of problems in people's lives. I think actually the
right.
reason I wrote that book is because after having been a psychologist for over 25 years, I kept seeing all these really basically good people coming into my office struggling with making bad choices and addictions and
Mm,
affairs and creating problems for themselves. And in many, many, many of those cases, I found that the core issue for them was unhealed shame. So
mm,
even very, very good people can struggle with very, very painful emotions and not be able to get a handle on it. So I thought I want to write a book for Christians because most of these
mm.
people I saw were coming from the church to help them understand that your problem is one with an emotion that's getting in the way of your relationships with God and others. Yes, shame is a very important emotion for us to lean into and figure out.
Yeah, that's so good. So why is it so hard to talk about shame? Why is it so hard to be vulnerable?
Well, vulnerability is different from being open. You hear people say, "I'm an open book." You ask me anything you want.
Mm,
Well, that's not vulnerability. If there's no risk of getting hurt, then it's not vulnerability. Vulnerability
wow.
is openness with the risk of being hurt. So I can be open and tell you stuff about my life, but if I'm not emotionally invested in what I'm saying and emotionally transparent with you, then it's not vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is where we get love, because if you're willing to bear yourself in a way that takes the risk, if I could maybe get hurt here, then that's where I can also be most loved. And the reason people don't
Mm.
want to be vulnerable, because that's where you can get most hurt. You can be most hurt and most loved there. So that's the price we pay. In order to really be loved and feel loved, you have to be vulnerable, and that's the risk of getting hurt. Uh,
Yeah, so
so we
let
don't
me see
want
if
to
I
do
have
it.
if I, let me see if I've got this right, because that's a really, really interesting point to underline. So vulnerability is the posture that we have to take in order to feel loved and accepted.
Right,
It's also the
right.
posture that we take that sets us up for a lot of risk. Is that right?
That's
So it's
correct.
both.
That's correct. It's risky. For genuine love, I have to take the risk of being
Mm,
transparent with you and open emotionally with you in a way that I can get hurt. And that's why you need to choose your confidants wisely. Uh, some say that you should just learn to be a vulnerable person all the time, and I would say that's a bad idea. Uh,
mm,
Dostoevsky wrote the famous book about Prince Miskin, who was this vulnerable, Christ-like figure, and vulnerable to everyone. People were taking advantage of him right and left.
Marcus,
And
can you
the,
give me a
the,
timer?
the book itself is called The Idiot, right? No one really wants
Mm,
to live that
mm.
way, because you can get hurt if you're vulnerable all the time. You have to choose your confidants wisely. You can't have this kind of intimate love relationship with everyone. You have to choose people who can be vulnerable with you too, in order for it to work.
Wow. Okay, so that applies on both sides of that equation, right? So you have to choose
Right.
who you want to have love relationships with, and you have to choose who you're willing to have vulnerable, risky relationships with. So that, and there's a whole nother level in there of acquaintance or friendship that
Sure.
isn't that deeply vulnerable and intimate place. Yeah, that's really, really
Sure.
good.
You cannot be vulnerable with everyone. You know, some
Right.
say really your close, really intimate friends, it's around seven. Uh,
Yeah.
they've done research in this area to say that's about all the people any of us can tolerate that kind of vulnerability with.
Mm.
So I think it's important to know that it's okay to have associates, friends, colleagues. They're sort of in that category of relationship with you. But your truly
Hmm.
intimate, vulnerable relationships, because it takes so much energy and so risky, we all need to be able to wisely limit the number of people we can be that transparent with, uh, and uh,
Mm.
because of the risk involved, the risk of being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's
that's really good.
powerful.
Yeah, that's good. Well, which leads me to my next idea. If you think about vulnerability and risk and love and all of that, I want to talk about the spirit of fear that I'm seeing so much of. I mean, we're currently
Right.
seeing this widespread fear sparked by the coronavirus, and I've noticed that um, people are more bold. They're more
Right.
aggressive. There's like all these
Right.
playground monitors out there because of the coronavirus. And I mean, I got bullied at Costco for not having my
Yeah.
mask on properly. So it
Right.
just seems like the spirit of fear is louder than it's ever been. So how do you make sense of the spirit of fear, and how does this relate to shame?
I think it very much relates to shame.
Mm,
The coronavirus crisis that we're in now is basically forced vulnerability. Like we just said, that vulnerability is something I can only tolerate so much of. I need to
mm,
have it in my life to have intimate relationships, but I can't have it with everyone. This virus is unseen. We don't know who has it.
mhm.
I don't know if I've got it right now or you've got it. We have to go get a test to know. I could be talking to somebody at Costco and they could infect me with it, and neither of us would even know that, right? So we're all feeling we could get hurt, and we could get hurt by some unseen thing that is somehow
Mhm.
mystically out there in the atmosphere. So we're all feeling forced vulnerability, and what that does is it scares us. I can't tolerate that
Yes.
much vulnerability. So if you were predisposed to feeling shame before this virus hit, that just is on steroids now. So now
Wow.
I'm afraid that I'm going to be exposed, and shame brings with it the fear of exposure. So
Mhm.
I have to keep my walls up and be protected, and you have to keep your distance from me. And it's sad that the medical people have latched onto the term social distancing, because really,
Uh-huh.
medically, what we need is physical distancing. Social distancing is unhealthy. Physical distancing is healthy. in a virus situation like this. But the social distancing creates isolation, and that's not healthy for
Yes.
us. So we need to
Right.
figure out how to have healthy social relationships while we're physically distancing. But
Yes.
the short story is this: we've got very much now a toxic culture of fear going on now because we're all afraid of being forced into a vulnerable situation where we can get hurt, and we're all walking around feeling scared because I could get hurt right now by some unseen toxic virus, and that then brings up where all of my issues with shame might be before that. If you were afraid of
Wow.
vulnerability before, you're terrified of it now. And
Wow. Oh, that makes
anger
so
is
much
a
sense.
very and anger is a very common defense against shame. So that's why people are mad a lot at Costco.
Wow. Oh, that makes so much sense. I mean, I'm seeing relationships and our community just fragmenting. I mean, people that we've gone to church with forever, all of a sudden, I'm just connecting the dots here. It's so good. So what I'm hearing you say is that um, the virus has put us into a forced level of intimacy that we would not otherwise choose because there's risk of harm. Um, and so it makes us even more protective, and then there's a resultant anger. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Right. Yeah, I'd say forced level of vulnerability, put it that way. That
Okay.
we
Okay.
feel we're all afraid that we could get hurt. If I
Yep.
go to the grocery store, I could get hurt. That's forced vulnerability. I don't want to feel that vulnerable with everyone. I live in Los Angeles. I don't want to feel vulnerable with 10 million people, right? So that
Wow.
scares me. And whatever
Yep.
issues I'd had with the fear of vulnerability before then, my secrets I want to hide, that if you found out who I really was, you wouldn't like me. That's the feeling of shame.
Mm.
That's now magnified. So I need you to keep your
Wow.
distance away from me. And I'm going to get angry with you really quickly if I feel you're coming too close, because I already feel this forced vulnerability because of the nature of the virus, because we can't see it.
Right.
We don't know that it's there.
Right.
So it makes us all feel vulnerable.
Right.
And rage is a very common defense against shame. Because think about it, what
Oh,
would you
that
rather
makes,
feel?
yeah.
Shame and unworthiness, or anger? You know,
Right.
anger is a
Right.
common
Yeah,
defense
and
against shame.
it's almost the same thing as what I talked about in the beginning, how we take on um, a self-blame posture because it gives us more power. So
Right,
now I'm in control, and yet it
right,
poisons the soul. So
right.
the way that you put that together is just so good. So question for you, what do you do if you're just overcome with fear? How do you handle that? What do you do? What do we do as counselors and therapists? What do we do with someone who's overcome with fear?
Well, um, fear itself is not a problem. Fear is an important part of life. I need to. It's the beginning of wisdom. I need to know what I can and can't do. But being overcome with fear signals
Mm,
me that there's a deeper issue. If you're overwhelmed by fear, if you're a fear-based person, if you're in fear-based relationships, there's always underlying shame involved. Meaning,
mm,
what what shame does, it weds itself with other emotions and fuels it. So it's not just fear, the emotion that's going to teach me how to set limits, teach me which direction I should go, which direction I should not go. Uh, Instead of fear being my teacher, fear then makes me uh, immobilized, and I'm not learning anything. Well, why is that? Why am I not learning? Why is no new information coming in because of the fear that I'm feeling? Well, it's because underneath that is a feeling of
mm,
shame. So fear can trigger shame, and the shame is the feeling of unworthiness and defectiveness. And now I don't want to learn anything new. I don't want you to learn anything new about me, because shame, the feeling of unworthiness and defectiveness and not worthy of love, believing the lie that you're not lovable, that I want to keep secret and keep hidden. So you just spin
mm.
around with your fear. So I'm
Right.
afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I'm afraid to go out, I'm afraid to
Right.
stay in, I'm afraid of everything
Right.
because my shame wants me to stay hidden.
So
Shame doesn't want to learn anything new.
all right. So that's fascinating. The connection between fear and shame and how the two of them together. Like fear's not a problem, but when you take fear and you connect it with shame, now you've got some toxic. What other emotions does shame connect with and keep us stuck and immobilized?
Well, unfortunately, I think shame is one of the most basic emotions because we were created. I believe we were created by a God for relationship. I think that's sort of my ontology. We're both fundamentally relational beings. Shame is the fear that I'm not worthy of love. So then I'm disqualified from truly intimate relationships. Then shame is underneath, can be underneath any emotion. Uh, for instance, I said earlier how guilt is healthy. Guilt is the bad feeling you have for what you did. Shame is the bad feeling you have for who you are. Well, shame can attach itself to guilt. We have lots of research suggesting that people who are just guilty without shame are pretty healthy
Hmm.
people. So if I were to say something about you that hurt your feelings, and someone else told me and said, "Yeah, you really hurt Elizabeth when you said that," my guilt would say, "Oh my gosh, I feel terrible that Elizabeth was hurt
Mm.
by what I said. I feel I'm a good person, but I did a bad thing." So that would motivate me to go to you and say, "I am so sorry I hurt you. The thing that I said was so careless. Can you forgive me for that? I feel so bad about what I did," right? Now, shame would make me feel bad about who I am. And shame would then make me feel like, well, I don't want to go to Elizabeth. If she got her feelings hurt about what I said, I just hope I don't run into her again. And so shame makes me want to hide and pull back, feeling that not just having done a bad thing, I'm a bad person for having done it. So shame can attach itself to guilt. And now you've got people who are chronically guilty all the time. They feel guilty about what they said, about what they did. They feel guilty
Yes.
about being a bad husband, a bad father. And we all know people like this who are just stuck in chronic
Yes.
guilt that never goes away. It's because their issue isn't with guilt, it's with shame. Their fear
Wow.
is that they're a bad person and they use guilt as a defense against shame. I'd rather feel bad. I'd
Wow.
rather say to you, I feel bad about what I did, than say to you, I
Right.
really feel bad about who I am. It's a lot easier
Yes.
for me to say I'm sorry what I did as opposed to I'm a terrible person for having done it. So
Right. So
shame
I'm
can
going to
attach
go
itself
back
to anything.
to, right. So let's go back to an earlier question about, uh, eh, it's interesting because a lot of people who struggle with shame don't know they struggle with shame. And there's a
Right.
whole bunch of stuff. There's projection and there's uh, the victim posture. Can you talk a little bit about the victim posture that's really tied to shame? And then after that, I want to talk about narcissism that's tied to shame. But we'll start with that.
The, I, Ironically, those are related. Those two are related because
Uh-huh.
the core of both of those is shame. Uh, but
Yes.
yes, the victim posture is rooted in the belief that I am somehow defective and that vulnerability is a weakness. So if
Mm.
I believe that being vulnerable in the way we've just talked about is not just a powerful way to connect to people, but vulnerability is somehow a weakness, then when I feel vulnerable, then that makes me feel defective. It makes me feel that I'm weak. So victims have this belief set that I'm a weak person. And because I am not able to be self sufficient, and nobody is, then I should be ashamed of myself. So whenever anything happens, I feel someone's doing it to me because I'm powerless. It's the belief in my own powerlessness that vulnerability is a weakness. I believe I'm weak because I feel vulnerable. I believe that I'm
Mm.
needy if I have needs. So they take healthy aspects of human living, vulnerability and having needs, and shame twists them into negative things. If I need you, then I'm
Mm.
needy. If I have any desire to have a dependence on you or lean on you, that makes me believe that I'm weak, right? So the core uh, feeling of shame that I'm unworthy of love can transform itself into a victim mentality or the belief that I'm powerless. So I need to look for explanations for why my life doesn't go well. And the reason doesn't go well is because someone is taking advantage of me because I'm powerless. So again,
Right.
shame is the core of that. It
Right.
it 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 causes me to believe that these aspects of human life that create connection and powerful living, vulnerability, having needs, become negative things because I don't really believe I'm worthy of love. I'm disqualified from that. And so I have to create dependent relationships to get you to prove to me that I have value. So if
Wow.
I'm the kind of person that needs you to give me a ride all the time, or I need to call you, and if you take my call and talk to me for an hour because I'm going to tell you how terrible my life is, then you're demonstrating for me that maybe you do value me, or maybe you don't reject me, because I believe that really you don't value me and you really want to reject me. So I create artificial scenarios to get you to prove or try to disprove my feeling that I have no value. And these sadly, they develop victim savior or victim perpetrator relationships where they're looking for people to do that dance with them who also believe they're
Yes.
powerless, and then want to like do all these things for them and try to convince them that they're a good person and they have value. I mean, they can't hear or believe any of it because their shame makes them not believe any of those statements and still look for people to get caught up in what we call the victim trap with them.
Right,
Rooted in
right. So
shame.
it's just right. It's a snowball. It's like underneath
Yeah,
this, underneath all of these weird little dysfunctional patterns of the rescuer and the victim and the persecute. All of that stuff is shame is like hidden underneath of that, and
right,
it's so it's so challenging to try to get at that deeper part when all you're seeing are these external symptoms like he did me
right,
wrong or
right.
that's a bad person. You know, I mean, we're gonna have to work this out, but I want to ask you about humility because it's kind of a part of the constellation, isn't it? And it's a big part of your book, humility and
Right.
self-esteem. And why is it so hard for people to just be humble?
Well, in our Western society, we don't value it. It's not a Western value. We demean humility as again a weakness. Again, humility actually is a very powerful force in connecting us to other people. But in Western society, we tend more towards the narcissistic end of the scale. We don't value humility.
Right.
Uh, Humility is not low self-esteem. Those are two very different things. And often in our culture, we conflate them. And we often refer to people who have low self-esteem and actually are struggling with issues of shame. We refer to them as a humble person. And I think that's really a misuse of the term. Humility is having an accurate self-concept and choosing to serve others. Humility is a choice, and
Good.
it's a powerful way of relating. To be a person of service in your relationship to other people does not mean you have low self-esteem. I help people not because I feel bad about myself. I might let people go ahead of me in line, not because I feel bad about myself. I choose to do that because I feel good about myself and I choose to
Mm,
be of service to others. That's what humility is. And
wow.
I don't think we understand how powerful that is, how powerful humility is in empowering us to have better relationships. And
Right.
actually, Jim Collins, who did all this research on successful business executives in the United States, spent years looking at what makes a successful leader, and he came up with two of the most important qualities of the most successful leaders in the most successful corporations in America, and humility was one of those qualities. That who you
Wow.
want at the top of a successful organization is a guy who has a powerful, good sense of who he is, and he chooses to serve others. That's actually a
Wow.
powerful way to lead other people. And in our culture, we so don't value that.
So it begs the question, how do you define self-esteem?
Well, self-esteem is based on two constructs.
Hmm.
You have self-esteem if you have competence and if you have secure attachments. So self-esteem is based on uh, feeling that I can do things well, I am useful in the world, and based also on the feeling of being lovable, that I have value, I have worth in the world. So I can earn the sense of accomplishment that comes from competence, but I can't earn
Hmm.
love. I'm worthy of love. I don't earn it. So I need both of these things.
Hmm.
I need to feel that I'm worthy of love just for being who I am in the world. And I also need to feel that I'm competent. I'm good at stuff. I can do things.
Mhm.
Now, you can see quickly that that can get out of balance. There
Yes.
are many people who only have the feeling of competence, and so they think their
Right.
self-esteem is only in that, and they don't have this sense of being lovable. And I see a lot of these guys in my office who are very successful business executives, but they have terrible relationships. They have
Mm.
total confidence in their ability to be competent and do stuff. They have very little sense of having value just for being who they are. So they're constantly trying to prove their value to other people. You can't, as I said, you can't earn love. You earn
Right.
a sense of accomplishment, and you have to have both to have healthy self-esteem.
Right.
So it's a balance between
So,
those two.
yeah, so very interesting because you're absolutely right. You see very, very high power executives that are extremely competent, but then that other part of feeling worthy of love with no accomplishment, with utter
Right,
helpless failure,
right,
whatever, right? So,
right.
all right. So you have this executive in your office. How do you convince this executive that they're lovable despite what they do and despite what they accomplished and despite all of their skill? How do you make them understand that they're worthy of love?
It's often difficult because I see a lot of these guys who are high
Yeah.
powered. They've been very, very successful, and they come in with that only one mindset, and that is
Mm.
productivity is all that matters. I don't want to. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I want to see what you have to do. So even they engage me that way, where they think that I'm like life coach for them. And what we're going to do is
Yeah.
come up with a list of tasks for us to solve, and we're going to check those off as we go. And if we can accomplish a whole bunch of stuff, then our time has been valuable. And it doesn't always work. Some of them are so wedded to that because many of them have made a lot of money with that sense of
Mm-hmm.
accomplishment. It's not always easy to get them to look at their lack of feeling of value just for being who they are, because that's shame, right? So I've actually
Right.
worked with a number of very, very successful executives whose issue was shame, because
Mm.
we're going to get to in a minute, the underbelly of narcissism is shame. So that gets
Yes.
quite confusing. But what
Well,
hopefully, if it
have
goes
you been
well, what
able Mhm. Have you been able to successfully convince these high power executives that they're lovable, even if they fail the next quarter's balance sheet, or they don't achieve the goal, or what? Are you able to uh, let me say it this way? How do you get them? How do you get into the heart of a man like that?
right, right. It's convince them is not the right word. I cannot convince them of
Okay.
anything. But what I can
Okay.
do is provide them with a different experience. So what good therapy is with these guys is, yeah, I've got to do a little bit of the performance thing with him or he'll leave. So yeah, we do some task stuff and we talk about accomplishments and what he wants to accomplish and what he needs me to help him accomplish. Do a little bit of that, or I'd lose him. And I gradually work over to looking at how he feels about things, because that's not an area that he goes to with anyone. And so he'll bring up something about losing a deal, a multi-million-dollar deal, and we'll
Mm.
talk about how he could have done it differently. And then I'll ask a question nobody else asks, which is, how do you feel about that?
Mm.
I mean, that must have felt kind of bad. And as we gradually work into, once he trusts me, work into talking about how he feels, then we slowly go down to, well, that felt bad. Well, that made you feel bad about yourself. Well, that made
Hmm.
you feel
Hmm.
insecure. That's not something he doesn't ever admit to anybody. And if I can
Yes.
actually get down to those vulnerable feelings, he then has a new experience with another human being. I mean, I can
Yes.
tell you that I actually was afraid. And the reason that I was
Mm.
bullying those people in the board meeting because I was afraid, for him to admit that to another
Mhm.
human being opens up a
Yes.
whole new way of relating. And then he experiences something
Right.
with me, vulnerability, that he's never experienced with
Hmm.
anyone else. And that's where we develop the sense of having value apart from accomplishment. And it's tough work. And
Yes.
these guys, it sometimes takes years. Uh,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
I've seen a number of them.
I actually work with a very, very high-powered trauma surgeon, and as he was processing something, I said, "So that sounds like that scared you," and he was like, "Nothing scares me. Nothing scares
Right.
me." I was like, "Oh, interesting. So." tell me where in your body you feel this the loudest. And he kind of did that sort of, scan. And he went,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, I am afraid. And then he just like burst out crying. And it was like, this is
Right.
exactly the place
Right.
where
Right.
now you can let in some healing. And it was a really, really wonderful moment. Now, another thing that these high power, accomplished, drivers will often say is, well, people don't affect me. They don't make me feel anything. It's my choice to choose how I'm going to feel about a certain thing. And I find that
Mm.
fascinating that science is now catching up with the lie, which is that you can't make me feel anything. It's whatever.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about mirror neurons and how they affect our relationships?
Yeah, I need to apologize for all of psychology for the last 30 years. Uh,
Yeah.
because it was our fault. We had Fritz Perls and other people saying that we're like two ships passing in the night, and if by chance
Mm,
we meet, it's wonderful, and if not, it can't be helped. And so that whole psychological philosophy for a decade or so was, you can't make me feel anything, I can't make you feel anything. So if I've said
right,
something and you're angry about it, well, that's on you. I'm
right.
not making you angry, you're making you angry, right? Well, I was never comfortable with that psychologically because it's not true. I can definitely make you angry and you can make me angry. I can hurt you and you can hurt me. And yeah, right now over in Italy, uh, there are a group of researchers who've discovered what we call mirror neurons. And what we now
Hmm.
know is that our brains are hardwired to actually experience what other people are experiencing just by watching them. We now know that,
Yes.
as you pick up a cup of coffee to drink it, my mirror neurons are making me think, wow, that looks good. I'd like to have a cup of coffee. It we can actually measure that now. That if I'm watching you do something, my mirror neurons are taking that in. You're actually affecting me with
Mm,
no words being spoken. It's actually watching the behavior of another human being triggers
yes.
motor neurons in my body that makes me want to stimulate the same thing. And we believe
Yes.
that's the substrate for empathy. That actually
Yes.
I'm able to neurologically, quite apart from my thinking. This bypasses the prefrontal cortex. There's no thinking
Hmm.
involved. I'm just experiencing what you're experiencing, and what we know with mirror neurons is it makes me anticipate what you're going to do next. So if you pick that cup of coffee up to
Ah.
here and stop, mirror neurons makes me go all the way with it. Makes me thinking, oh, I know you're going to take a drink of that. So all of a sudden, I want to
Huh.
drink the coffee. Uh, and so we are hardwired, and gets to be the problem. We're hardwired to anticipate what someone else is going to do, and believe me, that creates a lot of
Uh-huh.
marital problems because we're not always
Yeah.
right. I'm
Yes.
hardwired to think I know where you're going with this. Uh, and
Ah.
That's how we're making each other have feelings. We're making each other have experiences, and we don't even know we're doing it. It's very
Wow.
fascinating research. That's how connected we are
Wow.
as human beings. We're fundamentally relational.
Right. So much. Oh God, that's so good. There's so much to go with it. And it also makes me, all of a sudden my neurons are firing up around why it's so difficult to be around, like negative or,
Hmm.
mean people. And
Hmm.
I- so is that what we're feeling here? Is that my mirror neurons are vibing with somebody's negativity or vibing with somebody's meanness, and it just, for me personally, I'm saying that doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit me. Is that what's going on there?
Yes, well, it depends. I mean, also with some people, when they're around a mean person, it makes them want to be mean. So you have these mean girl
Yeah.
cliques, where we're influencing each other.
Yes.
I mean, hopefully, your response to the more healthy one is like, "Ugh, I don't want to be around that. You're influencing
Right.
me. You almost like you're putting something on me. Or you're doing something to me." We're studying now what we call this uh, nonverbal, unconscious, affective communication. That's the long term for it. That we are nonverbally communicating feelings and it goes
Mm.
right from your unconscious to my unconscious. So I'm feeling something around you that I don't have language for. I'm not even putting it into words, but I'm getting a sense of something. And you're going to go somewhere with it.
Wow.
Either I'm going to be repulsed by that, make me want to get away from you, or something inside of me goes,
Mm.
yeah, let's be mean. Yeah, we don't like her anymore.
Oh,
So
yes.
we join with it or we push away from it, and we don't even know we're
Right.
doing it because it's not conscious. There's no language involved.
Wow. Yeah, I'm already seeing like the news in my mind's eye, with all the looting and the destruction and everything that we're seeing over this tragic death, that happened in
Right.
Minneapolis. Uh, and that's what happens in mobs. Is that right? It's just that whole mirror neuron just gets a whole mob doing the same thing.
It's an aspect of it too, yeah. And there's
Hmm.
social psychology around that too. Uh,
Sure.
and we think the brain is more wired for tribal thinking than anything else now. Well, we need to have
Hmm.
our side, our team, uh, and so we are tribal. And it's really
Wow.
unfortunate in the United States that we only have two political parties because you got to be in some one camp or the other, right? Even though there's a lot of stuff
Hmm.
maybe with my side that I don't agree with, I can't say that because I need to be a
Right.
part of my tribe, and then that creates that
Yes.
whole mob mentality too. That we're going to go do this, we're going to object to that, and we got to be
Yeah.
you got to be a part of some we, right?
Yes.
So there's
Yes. Yes. So
yeah,
it's a combination of the whole
yeah,
brain structure and mirror neurons, and then the social psychological part of that. So that's really really good. So
right,
I'd like to just try to tackle this juicy topic of narcissism. So I love what
right,
you say in your book, where you say arrogance is shame disguised as confidence to distract
right,
others away from painful feelings that I am hiding. So
right.
say a little bit about that.
Yes, as we talked earlier about the victim mentality that's rooted in shame, uh, there are basically two directions to go if you believe that vulnerability is a weakness. One is victim mentality, the other is narcissism, the other is independence. I'm super independent, I don't need anyone. And
Mm,
it's ironically based in the same kind of shame that the victim mentality is based in. So arrogance is not confidence.
hmm,
Just let me say that right off the bat. Uh,
okay.
Arrogance is not confidence. It can look the same. People are
Uh-huh.
saying, I can do this. I'm the best person for the job. I'm very competent. But how you know the difference is ask yourself how you feel in that person's presence. When you're in the presence of an arrogant person, you don't feel good because an arrogant person
Hmm.
doesn't really care about how you feel. A confident person is able to pay attention to you. A confident person is not threatened by your feelings
Wow.
and your needs and isn't in competition with you. So if I'm a
Right.
confident person, and I'm
Hmm.
not riddled with shame, then I'm going to believe that I can do things, but I'm also excited that you can do things. I don't view your competence as a threat to mine. An arrogant person feels threatened. That's the chain, right? So I need to be the best person in the room, and no one else can be great either. I've got to be better than
Wow.
everyone, and everyone's a threat to me because my shame, my actually healed, hidden feelings that I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, is driving me to over focus on my competence, and that creates arrogance. So, and that's
Wow.
really what we mean by narcissism. Uh, the construct is kind of convoluted and more complicated than I'm making it,
Yeah.
but in a nutshell, that unhealthy narcissism is an arrogance to hide my shame and an overemphasis
Right.
on my competence because I fear that if you really saw me without any of my accomplishments, you wouldn't value me. My fear
Huh.
is I have no value, inherent value for who I am. I only have worth because of my competence. So I've got to arrogantly demand that I am the only one, the most competent one in the room, and makes other people feel bad. So that's how I
Yes.
said that it's how you determine it. Because if you're around someone who's arrogant,
Wow.
he's sucking all the air out of the room, and you don't really
Right.
feel good around them.
Right. So, all right. So, what do you do if you're in a relationship with someone who's arrogant in this way? How do you stay connected with that?
Well, that's extremely difficult because unfortunately, if there's that much unhealed shame in someone who is very entrenched, because there are degrees, obviously, right, of narcissism. If it's
Right.
way out on the end, they're not interested in listening to anybody else's input. So typically, when they come into therapy, it's a really tough uh, uh, go of it. I mean, sometimes they'll come into therapy because their wives make them come in. Statistically, it's
Yes.
more of a masculine trait than feminine. Although women are catching up, there are
Uh-huh.
almost as many narcissistic women as men, but traditionally it's been more men. Or
Mm-hmm.
their wives drag them in marital counseling, and that's really tough because they're there against their will. So it's tough to create the safety that leads to vulnerability, and having them experience themselves in a way that's healing is difficult. If you're in a relationship with someone like that, I'd say if it's extreme, your best chance at help is getting them into therapy. I'd say going to marriage counseling, your best
Mm-hmm.
first shot at it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very difficult to argue someone into vulnerability, which is what heals it.
Right.
Vulnerability is necessary to heal
Right.
the unhealed shame. And arguing with
Well,
someone to make them be vulnerable doesn't work.
okay, so let's land there for just a second. You talk about in your book that um, having an experience of acceptance has a powerful healing effect on shame. So I'm drafting off of how do you stay connected with someone who's arrogant or narcissistic or whatever else, and I'm guessing that the answer is some degree of allowing them an experience of acceptance that
Right.
allows them to heal in a different way. So can you say what does that look like? Giving someone who is wounded in that way and they're difficult, giving someone like that an experience of acceptance that can be healing. What does that look like?
Um, yes, that's really important. So this is maybe the most important thing we've said all day is what heals shame,
Yes.
right? So all right,
Yes,
shame a
right.
problem, we get it. What heals it? Three things:
Yes.
courage, vulnerability, and acceptance. So the courage to admit that you feel shame, number one, or we can't heal it if we don't know
Mhm.
what it is, right? So it takes courage, like your surgeon, that took courage for him to go, oh my gosh, I am afraid. That took courage, the courage to admit the
Mhm.
feeling, then the vulnerability to share that feeling with someone else, because you can get hurt. If I as a very competent
That's
surgeon
right.
have the courage to admit that, oh my gosh, I'm afraid, and then I share that with another human being, you could humiliate me for that. You could call me a wuss or
Yes.
incompetent or what am I shouldn't be in surgery if I'm afraid. uh, so vulnerability follows the courage to admit
Mm.
you have the feeling, the vulnerability to share it with another human being, and then the experience of acceptance once you do. Now, you can have the
Wow.
courage to be vulnerable, but if you don't have the acceptance, then it doesn't get healed.
Mm.
So
Wow.
there are plenty of times when people have gone to their
Yeah.
spouses and they've had the courage to admit vulnerable feelings, and then they've vulnerably confessed those feelings to the spouse, and then the spouse shamed for having those feelings. It was such a
Yes.
nightmare. So vulnerability
Yes.
alone does not heal. Uh, you have to have the experience of acceptance once you are vulnerable. And that's
All
what
right.
powerfully changes this.
Okay, so I just want to underline this because you're right. This is so important. So the person who is struggling with shame that manifests in a bunch of different ways, whether it's low self-esteem, over self-esteem, narcissism, whatever, the person with shame must first have the courage to share their feelings, their heart, their fears, whatever. And that's the vulnerability part. So courage,
Right,
then vulnerability to share that. And then there
right,
has to be a safe place to land. And that safe
correct.
place to land is typically the spouse, right? I mean, because I'm
Yep,
in marriage boot camp, it's mostly couples. And
yep,
so if I have someone who will step up out of their stuff and say, I am feeling some feelings of uh, weakness or fear or something. And then that partner, their mate, has to be a safe landing place. Now that tripartite healing constellation, if you will, courage,
yep,
vulnerability, acceptance for two people, that's
yes,
what heals shame and
yes,
also creates connection between the couple. Ooh, that's so
correct,
good. That's so good.
correct, correct.
Yes.
And you can see how that last part is so important, because just being vulnerable with unsafe people is a bad idea.
Yes.
That's what I was saying earlier. You got to choose your confidants wisely, because if I am uh, have the courage to own my vulnerable, painful feelings, and then am vulnerable with someone who doesn't respond with acceptance, it's going to actually set me back. I'm
Yes.
going to feel worse that I did that. So just walking
Right.
around being vulnerable is not a smart thing to do. We need to
Right.
realize there are safe people and then there are unsafe people, and
Right.
we can help people learn how to be a safe person. We can,
Yes.
that's what we do in the marriage boot camp. That's what you do. If I do in
Mm-hmm.
therapy, I help
Mm-hmm.
people learn how to be a safe landing place for vulnerability.
Yes.
Because a big
Yes.
problem that a lot of people have is they fear vulnerability. So
Right.
if you're vulnerable with me, that could scare me, because it makes me go like, oh God, my gosh, now I've got to be vulnerable too. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
Right.
say something to shut you down or dismiss you,
Yep.
or
Yep.
make you shut up about that because I don't want to go there. And that's very
Right.
injurious. So we
So,
have to
okay. So
help
this is,
them.
yeah. So this, I'm just gonna pitch one of the boot camp tools, and this is that the third part of it, the courage and the vulnerability, and then the acceptance. Acceptance. So I just want to. I hammer this every week when we do our live streams, and I hammer it to death at the boot camp. I call it drill and kill over and over and over. But it's the tool of MVP. MVP. This person who just shared their heart is the most valuable person to me. MVP. M. I'm going to mirror. What I heard you say is that
Mhm.
situation scared you. V, validate. It makes sense that you would feel scared. And P is for hope. My hope is that we can get back to the place where we are deeply connected, despite the fact that we had this little dust up. So, for all of you guys listening, again, MVP, if you can just learn that one tool, it will absolutely revolutionize your relationships. And it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a psychologist friend of mine, and we were talking about trends in the field of psychotherapy, specifically with couples. Okay, I'm getting really wonky here. I should probably not be talking about this, but anyway. So if you think about like EFT, which is is a wonderful counseling tool for couples, emotionally focused therapy. It's simply another iteration of Carl Rogers and empathy and then MVP is the same thing. All of those things are tools to get us to be good at accepting one another. I don't have to feel
Yes,
what you're feeling. You don't have to feel what I'm feeling, but I do have to acknowledge that your reality. And so I mean that's that acceptance part of that, and I'm really passionate about that. So hopefully I didn't get too
very
wonky
powerful.
about it.
No, it's very well said. I'm so glad you're doing that. That is very, very powerful. And it's so true that we
Yeah.
think in marriage and our dust-ups, what we want is agreement. We think, I need you to agree with me.
Yes.
We don't need that. What we need is validation.
No.
Exactly what you just said. I don't need you to have my
Right.
same feelings. I don't need even you
Right.
to agree with them, but I need you to see that I'm not crazy for having them. That's the validation part. It makes
Yep.
sense to me that you have those feelings. That's what we need. That is
Yes.
acceptance. That's what heals shame. That's what creates
Yes.
intimacy. Exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It's not agreement, and we all think it is. People come to my office
Mm-hmm.
saying, it was in 2016 and we were in the Ford. No, 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 it's 2018 and we were in the Chevrolet. And they're arguing over the
Right.
details, thinking if I can make you surrender to my details, I'll feel better.
Yep.
No, it doesn't matter. We need exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay, we're running a little bit out of time, and I did want to talk about. So, as a live stream, we do have people calling in and connecting with us, but I did want to just pitch this over to you, Mark, and see what can
Okay.
you say to this person. He wrote in that somewhere. Okay, this is his writing. Somewhere in my warped mind, patterns were created to preserve my life or to ensure survival. Okay, so he's getting this. It's
Mm-hmm.
like whatever I need to release had good intentions and helped protect me for a very long time. So now I
Mm-hmm.
struggle with knowing what I'm going to do when a void is left, when I no longer have this thing. And I think what he's talking about is shame. And
Yeah.
he's asking, is it normal to feel like I'm preparing to mourn, preparing to lose myself. I am scared of
Mhm.
getting rid of my protective shell. And when he
Right.
was writing this, I was going, oh, this is so much the whole shame constellation. So what would you say to this person?
I would say you're on the verge of becoming a new person. You're on the verge of
Yes.
transforming into a better person. And it does mean you've got to grieve the loss of the person you were. That's
Yes.
true. We cling to the familiar. And often
Yes.
we employ childhood strategies to survive our childhood, and we're still clinging to them as adults. We don't need them anymore, and they're actually dysfunctional. The things that helped
So
us
good.
survive our childhood are getting in our way in our adult life. And to have this moment where you're at right now, the realization I've got to surrender the familiar, the guy I've always known, the guy
Mm,
that got me this far, is its only way you're going to become a new and better and more powerful human being by surrendering those old
yes.
strategies, that shell, that
Yes.
defense against vulnerability, and
Yes.
realizing that you're an adult now, you can be vulnerable. As a child, you couldn't, it was not safe. If you had an abusive
Right.
parent, you couldn't be vulnerable with that person. You can choose who you're going to be around now.
Right.
You can create safety for yourself as an adult. And you're right to be afraid
Right.
because transitioning is scary. You're becoming something new, and we always fear the new,
Mm,
but sometimes new is better. I would say
yes.
this is an exciting and scary time, and the feelings that you're expressing is what any honest person would feel once they realize that, you know
Yes.
what, I was probably traumatized earlier in life, and I need to employ some emergency strategies to survive that trauma. I don't need to keep living that way anymore. I want to live in a more vulnerable, powerful, connected way. And I've got to surrender some of those old tools that are getting in my way now. So I would say,
Yes.
yes, your shame makes you fear that you're not going to find that love, but that's a lie.
Right.
Uh, you're entering
Right.
into a stage where you can believe you're worthy of it.
And think about it. I'm sort of noodling back to your tripartite uh, formula of courage, vulnerability, and acceptance. And it sounds like this person has stepped up with courage to be
Hmm.
vulnerable, to share some of the fears of letting go of some of this stuff. Now, the last piece of this is he's going to have to find a safe place to land, a place where he can be
Yep.
accepted, where he can share his fears, where he can share his stories. I mean, maybe some of the stories from his past have never really been, uh, unpeeled and unwrapped in all of
Right.
their, yeah. So I love
Very likely.
how yeah, I love how your courage, vulnerability, acceptance ties in perfectly with what this person's talking about. And I also love how it sort of dovetails into what we do at the boot camp with MVP. So cool. That's just, yeah, so cool. So
Great.
we're kind of like winding down on this live stream. So many people have written in and asked questions, and I'd love to be able to do this again sometime because there's so many. I mean, we
Great.
could have taken one piece of this and done a whole hour on it. So I just
It was a lot.
in yeah, it's a lot. So just in conclusion, I just want to say thank you to all of our viewers. And thank you for sending in your questions. And thank you, Dr. Mark Baker, for being such a huge influence in my life and on the Marriage Boot Camp. If you come to the Marriage Boot Camp, you will see some of his work in the form of videotapes, etc. And we do have a boot camp coming up um, July 8th through the 11th. And it's a new event. Because of this whole virus, we've had to cancel two of our boot camps. So we have another event July 8th. It's at the Renaissance Legacy West Hotel, a beautiful, gorgeous hotel here in Plano, Texas. So look on our website at marriagebootcamp.com. And also for more information on Dr. Baker and his many, many resources for hope and healing, go to laviecounseling.org. And again, please join us in July. Spaces are filling up pretty quickly, and the details again at marriagebootcamp.com. So, any last words for us? We've got a minute. I'd love to hear any closing thoughts, Mark.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Elizabeth. It's always good talking to you.
Yes.
Uh, and I want to encourage people, if you've heard anything today that strikes a chord in you, I encourage you to pursue that. It's very difficult to pursue the subject of shame and vulnerability.
Yes.
It very few people you talk to are going to want to do that. We admire vulnerability when we see it in others, but nobody wants to do it themselves. It takes a lot of
Yes.
courage to face this. So I would say follow that feeling. It's going to lead you to a better, more connected, more powerful place. I actually believe
Mm.
that the ability to live vulnerably with people who are safe people is the most powerful way to live. And it's scary and hard. And just like the example you read of this guy, he's right on the precipice of living a more powerful life if he can find safe
Yes.
people to land with his vulnerability. So I encourage everyone who's listening to pursue that path.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark. It's been a wonderful time. Stay with us. In 2 weeks, we're going to do another live stream with another topic, so we'll keep y'all informed. I'm Elizabeth Carroll. My husband Jim and I have been bringing the Marriage and Life Enrichment Boot Camp to people just like you for close to 30 years. You might recognize us from the hit TV show Marriage Boot Camp. We created and starred in the show for 7 seasons with the hope of teaching celebrity couples how to do healthy relationships and also to reach the viewers with the message that you too can have a great life and a great relationship if you just had the tools. Now, we not only understand you, but we've been there and we have proven techniques to take you from where you are now to the joyful life you long for. Grads will tell you that the boot camp is life-changing, and they rank it as one of the top 10 experiences of their lives. Just check out the testimonials. And the boot camp itself is action-packed. You will never be bored because you will be an active participant in your healing journey, and you will leave with the tools to create and sustain the life you've always wanted. Join us. If you have any questions, contact us on the website or hit us up on chat or just give us a call. We can't wait to see you become the best version of you.